Good afternoon.
Hold on a second.
I'm Matt Taskey, Director of Alumni Engagement here at Mount St. Joseph University, and I thank you for joining today. Today, we are excited to present our first Lions at Lunch mini-series with President H. James Williams. We look forward to Dr. Williams' remarks and also welcome any questions the audience members may have. So without further ado, Dr. Williams.
Thanks, Matt. And good afternoon, everybody. I'm really pleased to be here, really pleased to be at the Mount. And what a beautiful day for us to get together. You know, 2020 is going to be remembered as a year unlike any other. We knew that it was going to be an extraordinary year for us because we planned to celebrate our 100th anniversary. And we began it in great fashion back in the fall of 2019. It was fantastic. And we went all through the fall semester, celebrating every chance we had, and then into the spring semester. And then what happened? Of course, COVID-19 reared its head. The pandemic has been in our lives since that point. And wow, what a challenge on the one hand. On the other hand, what an opportunity for us to rethink who we are and how we move about our business. I'm grateful for the opportunity to continue the mission of the Sisters of Charity through our daily operations here at the Mount. We were established on a strong foundation rooted in faith and perseverance, which has allowed us to know our true north every day. We have clarity in the face of these uncertain times. There's no doubt about why we exist and what we're trying to accomplish. Our Mount community continues to show up for our students, especially during these times of hardship for so many of our students. The generosity and support of our alumni and the care and commitment provided by our faculty and staff ensure that our students are going to receive the education and care they deserve as we prepare them for the future as leaders in their chosen professions, in our community, and even beyond. I thank all of you for joining me today, and I look forward to our having a conversation and maybe my being able to answer some of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. As I stated earlier, we do welcome questions from those in attendance. Please enter those questions in the chat box and we will answer those, or Dr. Williams will answer those how they are received. So Dr. Williams, the first question we have for you is, how did COVID-19, the state of Ohio and Hamilton County health directives impact the spring semester?
Well, the spring semester was impacted significantly. First and foremost, we had to change the way in which we deliver our coursework. We take pride in being one-on-one, face-to-face, and taking each student one at a time. And so we were challenged to figure out how to continue to do that, continue to make that connection, that hugely important connection with our students when we were not able to be face-to-face. And so we had to convert quickly to remote learning, is what we're calling it, because we use so many different remote approaches. But clearly we had to start doing a lot of things online. So one of the first things we had to do was to purchase and distribute a fleet of laptops so our students could use them, at least those who didn't have their own computers. We also had to, in many instances, provide Wi-Fi access for some of those students. And we were happy to do that. We had to transition our curriculum from completely face-to-face to all online, and we did it very quickly and very effectively because of our faculty, staff, and particularly our technology experts as well. So that was the first thing. But the other thing that happened is we had to close down the residence hall, which means that now we have to allow those persons who are accustomed to being on our campus and having access to all of our support systems right here, face-to-face, one-on-one. Now we had to do it differently. And so everything had to change. First of all, we had to allow students to leave the campus, and we had to provide refunds. So we did pro rata refunds for the students because obviously they would be living in the residence halls for the rest of that spring semester. So that was a big change, cost us a lot of money. In fact, we reduced the university's revenue in that year by approximately $3.5 million. But it was the right thing to do. So we weren't concerned about that. But we also had to increase our expenditures to make sure that the support services were now available to students who couldn't just walk across the quad to avail themselves of those resources. But again, that was the right thing to do. And we wanted to make sure we kept students on target and on schedule to complete their degrees in a timely fashion. So we did those things because, again, they were the right things to do. And we're really pleased that we were able to have a really successful spring semester. And it's interesting because a lot of colleges and universities across the country decided they would change their grading scheme. They would allow students to do pass-fail for their courses because they figured if the students wouldn't be able to get the kind of support they needed, and et cetera. We didn't do that because we knew that our faculty and staff would rise to the occasion. And so we kept our same grading scheme, but we effectively just said to our faculty and staff, you know, let's do what we always do. Let's make sure that we're responding to the students so that they can get the best quality education that we have to offer. And that's what we did. And as it turns out, in retrospect, we looked and were able to determine that, you know, we had a regular sort of semester in terms of grading. There weren't any more difficult situations, and there weren't any more students failing, for example, anything like that. Students were able to educate themselves as well as they might, and we were able to provide the support that they needed. So I'm really pleased that although the spring was really tough, we were able to get done what we needed to do. The faculty worked diligently with students to keep all of them on track, even those obtained degrees that required clinical hours. So if they couldn't get the clinical hours in one way, we got it to them in another way, through simulations, for example. But I'm pleased that we were able to get done what we needed to get done during the spring semester in some very challenging times. Because on top of all of that, of course, we had to make sure that we were able to keep everybody safe. And so on our campus, we had to send most of the workers home. Though faculty and staff were teaching classes remotely, of course, but all of our staff were also working remotely. We had only a skeleton crew of folks here on the campus to make sure that it could still be available to the extent that we needed it. We wanted it to stay beautiful. So I really applaud the work of our custodians and and our maintenance folks for making sure that this place continued to represent Mount St. Joseph University the way we wanted it to. So it was a tough spring semester, but you know, we're glad that we were able to get it done, and we're not surprised that we were able to get it done.
Absolutely, thank you. The next question that we have is, or that came through is, how did the Mount prepare to safely reopen this fall?
Well, we prepared carefully is how I would sum it up. We started early and we met often all through the spring and summer months, preparing the campus for faculty and staff to return safely in August. And we started with making sure that everything that we did, all the planning we did, had health and safety first and foremost on the agenda. And then how do we make sure that the students get the quality education they deserve? So we started by investing in faculty training. We helped them learn how to best deliver educational content virtually instead of face-to-face. All of our faculty participated, incidentally. Even though we have great faculty members, everybody understood that, hey, this is a different situation now. We have to make sure that we are equal to this task. And so faculty, you know, voluntarily met during the summer, all throughout the summer, to make sure that we could be prepared for students when they returned in the fall. We launched the InSync virtual learning platform. What we did was to listen to the survey results that we received from students who studied remotely during the spring. And we listened to what they had to say about what they liked and what they didn't like about those experiences. And we tried to take the best of what they wanted based on those survey responses. So for example, the students said they liked the flexibility of virtual learning. Well, we took that into consideration. So many of them have outside responsibilities. They had to take care of their children, or they had to work, or they had to take care of their parents. But the point is that they appreciated the flexibility of virtual learning, so we took that to heart. Students preferred well-organized classes, and not surprising. They wanted to have information up front. If they had the materials in advance, it could help them plan. And if they had it, all the materials they needed for a week in advance, they could plan that week more effectively. And so, again, we took that into consideration. They wanted to make sure that whatever they did in studying was consistent week to week, the way they would have them if we were doing face-to-face classes. And then finally, interestingly, students like the combination of synchronous and asynchronous content delivery. Now, when we say synchronous, we mean that the students show up at a particular point in time, and they're going to have their exchanges, classroom exchanges during that time frame. So on a Wednesday at 10 o'clock in the morning, boom, for an hour and a half. But they also appreciated the asynchronous content. That is, they would have an opportunity to access all the materials they needed and do it when it was best for them. So there was no set time that they had to complete the coursework. So what we did was to make sure we incorporated that as well. And so that InSync virtual learning platform is designed to address all the best parts of what students wanted and enjoyed about that remote learning during the spring, and to try to address all the challenges by adding more support systems to that. And so the InSync virtual learning platform really is a creature that was developed by our faculty and staff, really creative approach, but to make sure that students could get what they needed when they needed, given these set of circumstances. And that's what we do. We pride ourselves on being able to accommodate the special needs of our student populations. During the summer, we also talked about transitioning back to the campus environment. We have been working remotely for so long, but we wanted to make sure we could get folks back onto the campus to do the work we needed to do. And we know that we had to take care of faculty and staff first so that they could, in fact, then turn around and take care of our students the way they needed to be taken care of. So we had 3 groups of faculty and staff meeting all during the summer, planning the different dimensions of a return to campus-based operations. One of the significant things we did, because we had to test folks coming onto the campus to keep them safe and to keep others on the campus safe. So we have daily health checks. And one of the ways we were able to facilitate that is by having our Mount Roar app updated to facilitate that process. So now our faculty, staff, and students can check in and do their daily health checks via Mount Roar. And Mount Roar continues to be updated, continues to be adapted so that we can facilitate the work we must do to keep each other healthy and safe. We invested in activity space that was different because we knew we had to. No more large gatherings. And so we had to figure out how we could get students together when we needed them to. So we reimagined the parking garage. Now that second floor of the parking garage has been reimagined so that we could facilitate large group meetings. We have the floor painted, for example, so that we can very easily put students into pods of 10 so that they can interact personally and yet have enough separation so that we could observe, the distancing, the social distancing requirements. We also added a tent to take overflow of students, for example, from the dining hall. We spread out the dining hall so that it's very sparse, but students can sit in the dining hall and still be socially distanced. But we also have additional spaces around the campus for students to meet, to be able to have some space while they talk to each other. We put a lot of little tables outside of in the quad and other areas outside on the campus to allow students to sit down and converse one-on-one, maybe 4 together, where they can still be socially distanced and still be protected. We developed new intramurals and student activities that enable students to come together in person and safely. We implemented safety protocols. We installed signage across the campus to enforce health practices, developed protocols for daily health checks, contact tracing, reporting illness, and quite frankly, returning to campus. In fact, we're hiring a new position, a care coordinator, COVID-19 care coordinator, to support student and employee health on campus. We're also implementing campus-wide testing protocols this fall. We're already testing a lot of our athletes, but we also have a challenge now to test at least 3% of our total student population. We're also looking to test for those persons who are sort of in high risk jobs here on our campus, where there's a lot of interaction, with students coming and going, because we still have our facilities open. Now, students have to make appointments. In fact, faculty and staff have to make appointments, but they can still meet face-to-face, online, or by telephone. But they can do that through, again, our Mount Roar app. So they can look for times that are convenient for them for appointments and set up those appointments. So those are some of the things we've done to make sure that we can return to this campus safely. We have protocols in place that require everybody to have their masks on unless they're in their office spaces by themselves. So I sit in this office and I usually have this thing actually on my neck like this, so that when I get ready to leave, I'm not going to forget it. And as I walk out my door, I have to put this on, because everybody has to have this on when they're walking around campus if they are connected and meeting other folks in passing. We also have, make sure that folks are socially distancing. So we have the floors marked so that folks can judge 6 feet. They don't have to judge 6 feet. They can just look at the spaces and know how far they need to be away from the person in front of them in the line, for example. So we've done all of these kinds of things, lots of signage. We've put up shields for those receptionists and others who are coming in constant contact with folks who are standing over them as they're trying to do work, trying to protect them as well. So a whole host of things we've done to make sure that we can return to campus safely. And at least so far, I think it's working pretty well.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. So we have another question that came through. It is, to what extent do you think online learning will affect small colleges and universities like the Mount for the 2021 academic year and beyond?
Well, I think it's going to affect us significantly. One of the things that we should prepare ourselves for is that a lot of what we've had to do of necessity during this crisis is going to become commonplace. We're all developing, fashions, and doing online work, is becoming much more comfortable for a lot of folks. Now, it still doesn't clearly replace face-to-face in every instance. And in fact, the research had already shown many years ago that the best teaching approach is to have some face-to-face, maybe even mostly face-to-face, but some online as well. Because in that online, particularly when you have asynchronous approaches, it gives students more time to actually think about sort of what they want to say and how they want to say it, and to gather their thoughts, and to have a gestation period before they must respond, to some questions. So it's a great learning approach. And clearly, as we move forward, I think a lot of colleges and universities, not just small colleges and universities, are going to be turning more and more to a hybrid approach, much like our in-sync approach that we're taking now for most of our classes during the fall semester.
Absolutely. Another question that came through is in regards to the Student Emergency Fund. Can you discuss that for us, please?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We've always tried to be prepared to help our students in every circumstance. At the university, we pride ourselves on serving the common good. And we, administrators, many of us, quite frankly, are first generation graduates ourselves. We understand the challenges that a lot of our first generation students in particular, but all of our students face when it comes to economics. So we've always tried to make sure that we're looking to how we can best accommodate the needs of all of our students. And when they have financial concerns, we want to try to be able to help them to the extent that we can. So we've always had an emergency fund for students that's controlled by the dean of students. And if students have particular financial issues, they can go to the dean and she tries to accommodate, in any way that she can. Sometimes it's just about buying a book. Sometimes it's making sure that folks have food to eat. But often, the funds are stretched, and we try to make sure that we do what we can with them. Well, when we had the crisis, in fact, I think we maybe left campus on March 18th or somewhere in that neighborhood. Well, the very next day, I think it was March 19th, we had, a special fundraising to get some additional support. And we were able to raise $25,000 to help to support the Student Emergency Fund. And that has come in quite handily because there are so many students, as you can imagine, who are having really, really significant challenges because of COVID-19. Many of our students, quite frankly, work at least part-time. And a lot of those job opportunities are no longer available because of COVID-19. And so those students continue to struggle because they want to educate themselves. And I applaud them for not giving up, for being determined, for having the grit that it takes to say, despite what's happening now, despite all these challenges, I'm going to continue to educate myself because I know how important that is for my family and me over the long term. So we applaud them and we try to support them. And now we have more funds even to help our students to be able to cope with the challenges of COVID-19.
Thank you. So next question we have is in regards to the residence halls. For those that might not know, residence halls are open this semester, but how are things going in the residence halls, Dr. Williams?
Well, all things considered, I'd say fairly well. Now, one of the things we did a lot of things actually to try to make sure that the residence halls could accommodate the students and that we were careful about how many students we put in to the residence halls. So typically we require all first-year students who live within outside of a 35-mile radius to actually live on campus. And we relaxed that rule this fall. I said anybody who wants to live off campus may. Could accommodate the students that we. I'm getting some feedback for some reason. Are you still hearing me?
Yes.
Okay. So we said anybody who wants to live off campus may. We have just slightly under 500 spaces available in our residence hall. And usually we have somewhere in the neighborhood of just slightly south of 400 students living on the campus. This year we decided we wouldn't do that. All spaces that used to have 2 beds in the room were now reduced to 1 bed. And where we have suite living, where there are 2 separate bedrooms and a shared bathroom, we left those spaces alone. But we also allowed that students could come in and, if they had a teammate that they wanted to be in a room with, they could do that. But for the main, in the main at least, we have 1 student in each room, except in those suites. But students are not sharing, generally speaking, 1 bedroom. So that's where we started. So we have 260 students living in the residence hall. They're being accommodated by our food service there. We have activities scheduled for them so that they can have things to do inside, but we try to do as much outside activity as possible. Students are required to wear their face masks unless they're in their own rooms, their own bedrooms. If they're interacting with anybody else in the hallways, then they're required to have their face masks. We're not allowing any visitors. In fact, when it was time to move in, we didn't even allow families to come in to help their children move in. We helped to move in so that we could control what happens. We're trying to minimize the exposure, the possibility of exposure for any of our faculty, staff, and students by controlling who comes onto the campus and particularly who gets into the residence hall. So we have a lot of stringent requirements about how to utilize that space in the residence hall, and we're enforcing it. In fact, I just learned this morning that we had to ask 1 student to leave the Living Center because he violated the rules, and we just can't have that. I mean, we're talking about life and death situations here when we talk about COVID-19. So we want to make sure that we're protecting folks as well as we can. And so far, I think it's going pretty well. And I think that's in large measure to the reaction of the students. Our students are just like other students across the country, and you've heard the horror stories. But I have to say that our students have done a pretty darn good job of complying with the rules and guidelines as much as we can expect for those students to do that. Now, obviously, we have outliers and we have students who don't quite do what they ought to do. But in the main, our students are doing a tremendous job. And I think the residence hall living is coming along about as well as we could hope.
You mentioned gatherings and interacting with folks. Can you speak to the December graduation and even spring 2021 thoughts?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest disappointments for us during the spring of 2020 was that we couldn't have a face-to-face graduation in May. That was really a downer for a lot of folks and a lot of students who had worked diligently for 4 years to get themselves in positions to graduate and to celebrate with their families and friends. Couldn't quite do it the way we wanted to do it. But we did a pretty good job, I think, of putting together an online graduation ceremony that at least a lot of persons were able to enjoy from their homes with their families and their friends. And it went off okay, but it was still a disappointment, relatively speaking. As we approach this fall semester, again, unfortunately, we are not going to be able to have a face-to-face graduation. And so our Dean of Students and her team are working on the alternative. And so we're looking for ways to supplement our sort of virtual celebration that we'll have officially. We usually have a baccalaureate ceremonial experience as well. So we're thinking about how we might be able to do that so that pods of students at least can have an opportunity to do something face-to-face on the night before Thanksgiving. I'm sorry, the night before graduation. But in the final analysis, we won't be able to have face-to-face graduation this year either. And unfortunately, it appears that that may well be the case for May of 21. Because despite all that we'd like to see happen, and despite all the work that's being done to try to, find a cure for this COVID-19, doesn't look promising at this point, at least in the short term. And it appears that we're going to be in this mode for at least the spring semester, which means almost assuredly we will not be able to do face-to-face graduation in May of 21 as well. But we do promise that we're going to do everything we can do to bring folks together to celebrate in whatever way we can do that. And we know we'll have some virtual components, but to the extent that we can find a way to have small group face-to-face kinds of opportunities, we're going to try to facilitate that as well. I just can't promise what can happen in 21 at this point.
It's understandable. We're on a day-to-day situation.
Absolutely.
Track right now. The next question we have that came through is, what impact did COVID have on the returning student body or incoming students in the fall of 2020?
Well, I guess there's two sides to that story. First of all, we think it was the enrollments were definitely impacted. We didn't have quite the numbers we hoped to have and that we've had in the past coming into the fall semester, not new students and transfer students. On the other hand, it's not nearly as bad as we expected. A lot of students did, show up, and they're participating actively and educating themselves well. So I think that's fantastic. And I think it's a testament to the Mounts reputation for delivering high quality education. I would say that while the recruitment numbers were not quite what we expected, our retention and continuation numbers were off the charts. We had better retention this year than we've had in a little while. And it's amazing to see that students, who had come, wanted to stay, wanted to come back, and did. And our spring to fall continuation rates, again, were off the charts. Much better than we've had on average over the past few years, and clearly better than we've had the last couple of years in terms of continuation. So again, all in all, and we're always looking for small victories right now, but all in all, we're pretty pleased with what we have now, and And again, I think the students who are here are enjoying themselves, and the students who are participating, in our in-sync classes or online are getting the education that they deserve. I think they're pleased with that, with the quality of the education. I know our faculty and staff are pleased with the quality of the work the students are doing at this point. So I think we're in good shape.
Great, thank you. We have a question more along the lines of athletic plans.
Okay.
So with the fall sports transitioning to the spring and the spring schedule announced, how are the student athletes preparing for their upcoming seasons?
Well, that's another big challenge for us, obviously, and another big disappointment in the spring, because we had athletes who were at the pinnacle of success in their particular sports, who didn't have the opportunity to bring it all to fruition. So our hearts went out to those athletes. But then they say, well, we have another opportunity because we're still in school, and they were all young, except I guess our senior hurdler who was challenged and didn't have that extra opportunity. But at least we have an opportunity to have those athletics this year. Unfortunately, the fall just was not the right time to have a lot of those sports to go into action. And so we complied with the NCAA Division III rules. We complied with the conference rules, the HCAC conference rules, and we decided to postpone all of our sports programs from the fall to the spring, those that would ordinarily be conducted in the fall. But what we have been able to do is to allow the students to practice. We've put them in pods of 10 for football, for volleyball, for soccer, for virtually every sport where persons are practicing now. They're practicing in pods of 10. They're being tested on a regular basis, to make sure that everybody can stay safe and healthy. But all these activities will move to the spring, and that will make it more challenging, obviously, because now we'd have all of those activities going on. And the question is, where do we place everybody so that they can practice, let alone play? But we think we're equal to that task, particularly with our new facility that's coming online by the end of November at the latest, our new Centennial Fieldhouse and Knowlton Fitness Center. We're really pleased that facility is, having its final touches coming up in the next month and a half, and we expect that at the end of November we'll open it up, and in the spring we'll be able to do a lot of good stuff in that facility, and there'll be a lot of space for all of these teams to spread out and to be able to get the work done, particularly with what we already had as resources. We've just simply supplemented it, with our new Centennial Fieldhouse and Knowlton Fitness Center. So we're looking forward to the competitions. Obviously, there's a lot of testing that's required, and the riskier the sport, the more testing we have to do. We're prepared to do all the testing that the state requires, all the testing that the NCAA requires, any testing that the HCAC requires. We really are making sure that first and foremost, we're taking care of our student athletes. Now, competitions will begin, and in fact, we're looking to have our first basketball game and our volleyball games at the end of November. November 21st, I think, is the first date for a basketball game. And we're still working out how we can have fans to participate. We'd like to have fans come. We believe we can spread them out sufficiently to protect them from the COVID spread, but we're still trying to figure that out. There's some challenges. Even if we could talk about spreading out the fans, question still is, how do we provide essential services as well? And we're still working on those pieces, but we're looking forward to the competitions, and in fact, the increased testing that comes along with competitions, particularly in our riskier sports. But we're prepared to make sure those student athletes are well protected. We're prepared to make sure that the visiting teams are well protected. And when we travel to other home teams, we're going to make sure that they are ready to accommodate our student athletes when we get to those campuses as well. So, athletics has always been important to the Mount, but only because we want to make sure that students have an opportunity to develop themselves, mind, body, and spirit, And even our students who are not formal athletes in the sense of being on one of our NCAA teams, they still want to make sure that they are challenging their bodies to keep up with their minds. And that makes sense. And we're trying to facilitate that as well. And so these new facility will help students to have better opportunities to be able to keep themselves in good physical shape as well. And it will help us to accommodate our student athletes as we move to the spring semester. That promises to be an exciting semester. Just think about it. All the different sports, all at once. We'll be overwhelmed, but in a very good way.
Absolutely. Another question that came through is about the Centennial Jubilee. But before you answer that, I just want to remind everyone that if you have a question that you'd like Dr. Williams to answer, please enter that in the chat box on YouTube, and we'll be sure to ask him. All right, Dr. Williams, Centennial Jubilee.
Well, talk about disappointments. I tell you, 2020 is a year because, again, our 100th year of existence, Centennial Jubilee was planned for last April in the spring, and we couldn't do that the way we wanted to do it. Unfortunately, we had to postpone it. Eventually, we had to go ahead and decide not to have that event at all in the way that we would ordinarily have it, that's for sure. But we know that folks still want to take an opportunity to just express appreciation for the Sisters of Charity and what they've done to bring Mount St. Joseph University up, keep it running for 100 years. And so we found a way to celebrate in small ways. And so we had a Centennial Jubilee online sort of awards week, if you will. And we started September 8th and we went through September 14th, which is Founders Day, where we highlighted a different awardee each of those days who talked about what the Mount has meant to him or her and his or her career. Excuse me. And we topped it off with Sisters of Charity members talking about their experiences and what the university has meant to them and their lives. It was a great opportunity, and we had a lot of great positive feedback from folks who had an opportunity to go online and effectively hear through these videos, hear from these folks about Mount St. Joseph University and the great experiences that they've had here. So it was an opportunity, wasn't quite what we wanted at that point, but it worked out pretty well. And we're looking forward, quite frankly, to seeing what we can do in the coming year. Spring will still be a challenge for us. So we're still trying to figure out how and when and if we'll do something during the spring as we typically would. But I promise you that another year won't pass without our doing something to continue to celebrate the life and legacy of Mount St. Joseph University.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. Those are the questions that we've received to this point. I want to thank you, Dr. Williams, for your time and involvement and information. And I'd also like to thank all of our viewers and guests out there. The next Lions at Lunch series will be on November the 12th at 12 o'clock noon, right here again on YouTube at www.youtube.com/MSJ1920. But Dr. Williams, would you like to share any closing thoughts?
Yes. First of all, again, in recognition of the challenges that we've all faced this year, let me thank all of you for your commitment to Mount St. Joseph University. I'm thankful for the Sisters of Charity who founded this university 100 years ago. They've been right there with us, praying for us, working with us in any way that we ask them to help us. We're thankful for the outstanding faculty and staff. We could do nothing without the outstanding faculty and staff at the Mount. They've done great work. It's been a challenging year. They worked tirelessly all summer to make sure that we could be prepared for this fall semester, and now they're continuing their day-to-day operations and making sure that students get the quality education that we've promised them. So thank you to the outstanding faculty and staff. I also want to thank all of our students. Again, students 18 to 22 years old are very similar across the country. And they're all still growing and maturing, like all of us did, even though it's been a long while ago for me. I remember going through that as well. And so we don't always do the right things. But I really appreciate the fact that our students have their hearts in the right places, and they're all trying to do the right things, and they, in the main, are. I'm really proud of the way we've been able to do what we need to do here on this campus during the fall semester. Our freshman students in particular, I think, really deserve kudos and congratulations, because amidst all the turmoil of colleges and universities opening their doors this fall semester, and you're hearing all the stories about all the wild parties and spread of the COVID-19 virus, we didn't have that here, because our freshmen came in and we were able to bring them in pods of 10, but in groups of no more than 90 or so in the parking deck, so that we could have, the space to socially distance and to have fresh air around us. But we did them in 3 separate orientations. They came, they participated, and then it was time for our welcome week, where we bring them all together. We were able to have functions all throughout the weekend, and not all of them were on our campus. But we were able to have those events without incident. They worked together, they played together. Of course, we had our staff folks there to support them, but they did the right things. And so I want to, again, special shout out to our freshmen for how you came onto our campus and displayed the kind of professionalism we would expect, young folks to have when they come to college. But all of our students, our athletes, everybody, again, you guys are doing a great job. And I appreciate sort of what you bring to campus. We look forward to seeing the smiling faces, although it's obviously difficult with those masks on, but I can tell that you're smiling by what you're saying and the body language. So thank you guys for all the work that you're doing, students. And thank you, quite frankly, for having the dedication and commitment to continue to educate yourselves in the way that makes sense, and that show that you understand how important formal education is to make you lifelong learners. And then finally, we as a university have had an opportunity to really reflect on our processes and procedures through this. When we talk about the challenges of COVID-19, we also recognize that there are opportunities on the other side of this. So what we've been trying to do is to make sure that we're keeping everybody safe, we're protecting our faculty, staff, our students, that we're protecting our culture to the extent that we can. Very difficult sometimes, being spread out and being so isolated in many ways, but still our culture is critically important. So we're safeguarding that. And we're strategizing now as to what we do on the other side of this. How do we continue to make it through this part? Because I don't think it's over yet, unfortunately. But how do we continue to do work and be effective during this time? But then what happens on the other side of this? We are going to wait till we get to the other side of this. We are planning for that now, because we are confident and we are optimistic that eventually we will come out on the other side. So we're grateful for this opportunity, the challenges we've been able to meet face to face. We thank God for his support. Thank God for his strength. And we thank all of our faculty and staff and students for the commitment. We know we're going to be okay. So let's smile and let's keep moving forward. Again, thank you for your time this afternoon. I love you guys.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. And please tune in the week of October 19th through the 24th for Homecoming, presented by Skyline Chili. And a big happy birthday to Skyline Chili, who turned 71 today.
Wow.
So congratulations to them.
Hear, hear.
All right. Thank you, everyone. And we will see you again on November the 12th. Have a great afternoon.